And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a newcomer into the temple, coming to us from Black Coffee Games, and the creator of Spectrum, which is currently in open beta, and the link for it will be in the description and the pinned comment, depending on where you're watching this. The one and only Stefan Hannevig, and I'm apologizing if I mispronounced that. How you doing today?
It's quite all right, Mildred. I'm doing very well, Mildred, and I cannot thank you enough for welcoming me into your most holy of holy places, where I'm looking forward to just having a lovely chat.
Mm-hmm. So, a bit of a tradition is opening with the humble beginnings. With that in mind, walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Well, okay, that is going to be a long lost story. So, there I was, I think I was 7 years old, when over the years I'd watched my father and his friends play this fairly new thing called Dungeons and Dragons, and I'd watched for a while, and they always were having a good time. My father was a very loud, boisterous man, very entertaining. And for my seventh birthday, my dad's like, what do you want, son? And I was like, Dad, I want you to teach me how to play this game. You guys have so much fun, and you're telling all these knights and dragons and all these amazing stories, wizards and scary hollows and all this. And so, with kind of a sigh of well, I did ask my son what he wanted. My father took the time to teach his 7-year-old son the most basics of how to play Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, first edition, and I've been hooked ever since. Not only because it reminds me of a great time when I was a kid, but over the years, eventually, I found that other people were also into this swords and sorcery, historical aspect, high fantasy. I'm a huge reader of Tolkien and any number of other of fantasy genres, and just as the years went on, I mean, there were times when it was me reading a D&D resource book because there was no one around, and then as the years went by, I just slowly found other like-minded people who just loved to play these games, and we told stories, and we got to kind of in a lot of ways play personas of ourselves or personas of interesting characters that we would never get to kind of think about or enact in real life. And I just ever since then, I've just been in love with it through multiple genres, various systems, and I've never looked back.
Mm-hmm. I could certainly see it. And I will note, when I was going through some of the material for Spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to the chart, I feel I do have to ask this.
Mm-hmm.
Was one of your early RPGs outside of D&D Marvel favorite?
So once again, you have pegged it. You've absolutely pegged it. But actually, it was not one of my earlier games. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s somehow that I grew up in a small town in Appalachia, West Virginia, where the only bookstore in town was the Christian bookstore for the longest time, and so getting exposure to some of this stuff was not always easy. And so it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I came across this kind of old derelict box from Marvel, and I opened it up, and that's when I got exposed to the chart, and their chart was great. It was such a kind of a fresh break from like the D20 systems that I'd been playing a lot of, and even though at that point I was like heavy into White Wolf, and I loved their D10 system, the chart was this kind of novel use of statistics or use of math that I just really liked, and it over the years it stuck with me, and I went back to playing lots of D20 and D10 D6 systems, but it always resonated with me, so that when long story long, when all of a sudden my friends and I found ourselves, this was probably 6 or 7 years ago at this point, kind of creating our own Franken system, pulling the things we liked out of various other systems, because as various systems are better at various parts of the game, and I just really like this idea of the chart. But once again, that was a more linear chart system. It was a little small, and so then we started playing around with seeing if we could kind of adopt the non-linear expression to it, and over the years it's kind of morphed into what we're trying to play with now.
I can get that. And given that, I'd like to play a little bit of word association. Consider this the nerdiest Rorschach test you've ever taken.
Okay, you suddenly made me nervous, Mildred, but I'm in. Go.
Don't worry, I'm not going to be laying back acting like I'm a shrink. I'm not. I would if I was a shrink, I would rather have somebody sit down and share tea rather than have them laying back on a weird looking sofa where they'll probably fall asleep. But so I'm gonna list off some names of some classic TTRPGs, and you
Okay.
can tell me if you had dipped into it, if you were familiar with it or whatnot. Just what comes to mind when I mentioned these names.
Okay.
Traveler.
Fantastic. Deep and involved. I died a lot.
Yeah, probably during character creation.
Not wrong.
I rarely am, and yet people are always surprised by it.
Well, I mean,
Boot Hill.
have not played.
Yeah, I'll find someone who's played Boot Hill one of these days.
I will now. I'm literally writing it down as we speak.
Star Frontiers.
Another fantastic game. Loved all the species, races, whatever I'm supposed to call them now.
I just call
all
them
kinds
races
of options.
because I don't get paid by the syllable.
Love it. And mechanics were a little complicated. Great game.
Yeah. Star Wars D6.
Played throughout high school. Loved playing with canon. Always had great reference points and never unsatisfied.
Merp.
Probably only played it once, and honestly, it didn't stick.
Right. Since we had talked about swashbuckling before we went live, Seventh Sea.
Have friends who've suggested it and read the rules, never got an opportunity to play it. Looks like a fun game that I love the spatial aspect of ships.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely see it. Any of the since we brought up White, any of the A trilogy. What was supposed to be what's now known as Trinity.
In Trinity, we'll have to. So that would be Vampire the Masquerade.
No.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
That's World of Darkness.
That's
Trinity
World of Darkness.
Was three projects. Aeon, which had to be called Trinity because MTV got into a bitch fit about it. Aberrant.
Yep.
And Adventure.
Definitely played Aberrant. Loved character creation and messing around with all the possibilities of what these crazy mutating things could do.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely great. Yeah. One of the ones I played a little less, but still actually a nice deep fun way, great. What's one a great intro to just making characters that can do just about anything that your imagination could possibly think of. Second only probably to Mage.
I've had the running joke for the longest time that Mage is a completely balanced game with no exploits whatsoever. And of course, anyone who plays Mage knows that that's complete bullshit.
Complete and utter. It's probably Mage is probably one of my absolute favorite games, and my very tight group, my tight knit group of friends and I, just for years, loved to play it. But we would run into this issue where, because it was so creativity focused and really the sky's the limit on kind of what you can try or do, it was oftentimes we would have a lot of people come in and they're just like, how am I supposed to know what to do? And we're like, bro, you're just supposed to figure it out. Come on, experiment. And it was definitely one of those things where we had a great time, but sometimes we had a hard time looping, hooking other people in who came from a more traditional gaming background.
Yeah. I can get that, and I've half jokingly said that weebs are my best students.
Okay.
Because and the big reason I make that joke is when I bring people in who have that kind of background, who they don't know what the wrong thing to do is, so they
Right.
so through that I don't have to have them unlearn things. And I can't remember who said it, but there was a college football coach who had said, "I don't want people who know how to play football. I want people who are 6'2" because I can teach them how to play football."
The people who have the interest, the drive, and the passion. Once again, like I often say, where I work, is that showing up and giving a shit is the first and most important step.
And the other reason I end up saying that is because some of the self-proclaimed old school types really hate this idea of bringing people who have more of a anime or video game background into tabletop, and since it makes them mad, it makes me laugh.
Okay, that's it's an honest statement, and I don't disagree. I remember when I was much younger, because I'm an old man now. I remember that frustration because people would come in. Best example I ever had. This guy was huge into anime, video games. His name was Todd. Great guy. We were playing a Shadowrun adventure, and all he wanted was to have a character who was cybernetically adjusted so that he had aluminum siding that could come out of his arms. And I'm like, Todd, that's stupid. And why would you want to do that? I can't even make rules for that. Like, what? No, just do something else. He's like, that's what I want. And it was from that learning point. I mean, he and I, because he was kind of like, hey, why are you being a dick about this? And I was like, I'm not. And then looking back, I was like, I was, because he wanted to do a thing. And I was so rules focused and genre focused at the time that I got in the way of him having the kind of fun he wanted to have when we were playing a game of make-believe.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot from that.
One of my dear friends, Joel, often says, "I make elf games," which is his way of saying stop taking it so damn serious. But also,
exactly.
Are you familiar with Rule 0?
No. Go ahead. Oh wait, I think I looked at this earlier. Is this another genre agnostic system?
No, that's year. You might be thinking of Year Zero, which isn't genre agnostic, but it is multi-genre.
Okay.
Rule 0 is a thing that's been in the tabletop circle for a very, very long time. And there are multiple ways that it's worded out, but this is the most common summary. The rules are there for entertainment. If a rule is getting in the way of the entertainment, throw it out.
We absolutely in our groups for the longest time, I've referred to this as a reference to what we call page 17. It was back in the day when there was some in one of the various rule systems we used. Page 17 said pretty much that, and that if rules need to be thrown out, throw them out. The goal is for people to be having a good time collaborating together, but that such things are the final arbitration of the storyteller.
Yeah, another
and the
variation that I often say is no one plays Uno as written.
I love it, once again, because one of the reasons that we are drawn, in my opinion, to this to this game style or storytelling style is the fact that we are using our imaginations, that we are trying to tell a story. And if the rules get in the way because I want to feel important or badass, that's a discussion point. If the rules are getting in the way because it's getting in the way of fun or expression, they need to be re-examined. I mean, how many games have you played that didn't have house rules?
That's why I say no one plays Uno as written.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And the ultimate case in point of that, when I was in, I think, middle school, I came across actually no, it was in high school. I came across a edition of Uno that that one of my teachers had that had a collection of fan submitted house rules. So even the people who were making Uno were aware that people were going to be house ruling and home brewing with that.
Yep. And it's never a bad time.
Mm-hmm.
Never a bad time.
And yeah, some of the house rules that are done there are just to extract maximum salt because this is still Uno.
Yeah, I mean, to spicing up a fairly straightforward basic game. Let's spice it up with some house rules. Absolutely.
I know that I had done one where the reverse card didn't reverse the turn order. It made it that you had to switch your hand with whoever was to your left.
I love that. That is phenomenal. Yep. I mean, still reversing. It's just a different interpretation of the word. Absolutely.
Yeah. So imagine the salt when somebody's got 2 cards and now they have to deal with having 8.
Yup. I love it.
And as somebody who does a lot of game nights with say Mario Kart or the like, I am well versed in causing mental anguish to my players.
It's a fine. It's interesting as the term that my groups and I use oftentimes is there's a few of us who are more or less what we call forever DMs, GMs, storytellers, narrators, because we are the ones who just for whatever reason we've been doing it a little longer, or maybe we enjoy it more, but we're the ones running the games, and it's one of those things. It's that fine balance because sometimes we're going to be doing things and you're not going to be happy with the outcome, but I always have to take my players. If it hurts engagement, maybe it's something I shouldn't be doing. If it adds some spice that maybe someone doesn't like, well, maybe that's just going to add to the tension of the story, and that's fine. But it's one of those things that DMs, GMs are constantly trying to balance out, and it's tough, and we make mistakes sometimes.
Yeah. And some people make the mistake of telling Gygax, "Could you make something more difficult?"
Sorry, I was taking a drink when you said that, and so I'm sorry, sir. Could you make this more math heavy and convoluted, please? And he's like, "I've got a chart for that."
That's not what I was referring to.
Oh, what were you referring to specifically?
How Tomb of Horrors got made.
Is that really that? So someone was it a dare?
No, what happened was one of Gygax's playtesters had said that the modules that he was putting them through were feeling a little bit too easy. Could he make something more challenging?
I played Tomb of Horrors. It was more of an exercise to see how far you could get before you died.
Yes.
Lots of fun. Once you go into Tomb of Horrors with that in mind, phenomenal module.
Yeah. But it was a case of some people should have learned from Frank Zappa because that's what happened in that case, and we get the black page, which even pro drummers struggle with.
Yeah. Could you make something that no one else could play? Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've seen various drummers try to play it, and the thing is very evil.
Wow.
Because it's constantly changing time signatures every few beats.
Oh my god. Hey, listen, we're going to change the tempo every few minutes with no rhyme or reason as to why. Okay.
Not every few minutes. It goes through 3 tempo changes over the course of 5 seconds. Okay. I mean, and once again, talk about a testament to technical ability, but at the same time, does it make the song better? I mean, the song was great, but it was a case of Frank Zappa deciding that everyone is a target for trolling, even his own band.
Fair enough. We all fall prey to trolling every once in a while.
Yeah, but now getting to with Spectrum, do you consider this a multi-genre game, or do you consider this a universalist game?
Well, that's a lovely distinction. The goal is to make it. The goal, of course, is to make it a universal game.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reality of such things is that such endeavors can only be an ongoing endeavor. For instance, and forgive me, the rules we have now, they're very open. They're in open beta. We're already getting ready to push out a bunch of changes. Nothing dramatic. Like the core is still the core. The meat and potatoes are there, but we're finding with getting feedback from people that we've got to simplify a few things down. And well, I'll get into like moving things to what we call the resource documents. But back to your question. We've already, with the system as it is, we've played, various levels of horror, exploration, some very kind of what I call like near future sci-fi,
Mm-hmm.
high fantasy, low fantasy. We've done some liminal horror, liminal mystery stuff. Because what we recognized is to just release this game, or sorry, this system, to say that it has everything you need to play anything you want, that would that's a physics problem, right? I mean, like, to represent everything requires, a lot of work. But we felt that if we came out with a system that could very easily do, high fantasy, low fantasy, and what we call contemporary, like roughly, modern day stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it can do that well, we're hoping and we're trying to make it so that we can then, as we add resources, as we add new optional rules, we can suddenly, we'll be able to integrate this more cyberpunk, near future, far future. One of my goals personally is, I love like the faster than light travel sci-fi stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to start there, it would have been very much honed for that genre, and I think that doing anything outside of that genre would have been more difficult. Whereas the idea of the core is that it's pretty much how to use the chart, basic mechanics that are kind of true to any genre, and then the idea is that we're going to have a few various resource documents that will have all of the, calling them optional rules. They're rules that don't change. Adopting them doesn't change how the core works, but we recognize that for instance, a great one is in our skills list. We've actually honed down the skill list from what's on the core right now to about 37, 38. But we recognize, for instance, if you're doing a low fantasy setting, there's going to be some of those skills that you might not necessarily really don't have a place in that setting, and so some of the techniques and things like that off the skills you may want to give or take, and so to put them in the core, because it would suggest that all genres have to have all of these resources, where that's not necessarily the case. And one of the things that has been very important to me is this concept of, as I think I said earlier, TTRPGs are effectively playing make-believe with dice. And I don't want to tell people how they're supposed to play make-believe for their enjoyment. But I would like to give people tools to help them play make-believe for their enjoyment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. And with that in mind, when it comes to the approach that you've got, since it's going in all these different directions, how do you manage what is known as analysis paralysis? And this is a problem that that happens with a lot of multi-genre and definitely happens with universalist games, where there's even superhero games aren't immune to this kind of thing, where there's so many different directions to take that people can be overwhelmed to a certain point.
Absolutely. And stage 2, since we're in stage like pre-1 or stage 1 right now, one of the things that once we get the resources tightened up is one of the things that we're going to do for, once again, for free effectively, is we're going to create. So sorry, let me back up for 2 seconds. So we have all these, we have a certain, we have these resource documents, like we have one for metaphysics that are abilities that you could describe as being magical, mutant-based, psionic, technologically, space opera, whatever. And then we'll have another one for skills, another one for conditions, because I know a lot of people who don't want to play with the encumbrance condition. So I'm not going to put it in the core. I'm going to make it so here are the rules if you decide you want to play with it. They jibe great with the core. If you don't want to play with it, don't pay attention to it. But one of the things we're going to do is we're going to make, as a tool, is one of any number of ways. We're going to make a suggestion. Oh, you want to play Spectrum High Fantasy? We're going to create a document where we've pared down and taken the resources that we think are appropriate for High Fantasy, and we'll put them all into one document. So if you want to just pick it up and play High Fantasy with kind of our generic High Fantasy build out, there you go. If we'll do, as time moves on, we'll do another one for like Cyberpunk. I'm already working on one for Contemporary, and the idea is, I agree with you. If I just give someone a widget that can do 45 different things, that's not necessarily something that they can just walk in and do. But if I give them the ability to be like, hey, play with this kind of preconceived genre, just like some other people make like these preconceived modules, get used to the system, and then you can tweak it any way you want as you go along, because you have all these other resources that you can add or subtract as you desire. Mm-hmm. That's going to be one of it. Like I said, that's a near future thing. Once beta for the core and the resources is done, then we can move on to making people tools for just walking in and picking up a generic High Fantasy build out for themselves.
And yeah, I can certainly get that. Something else I'm a bit curious about, since you did bring this up, and it's a bit of a section within the site, is the fact that you are, as I understand it, you're planning on putting a degree of complexity to combat so that it isn't just basic attacks.
Absolutely. One of the big things that happens is so you pick your skills, and then depending on your skills, we're going to have what we call and there will be techniques for all skills. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that it's my proclivity. I have a tendency to play, back when I was playing, I had a tendency to play a lot of quasi or not really combat even focused characters. I played a lot of socialite characters who, that more classic thief who kind of sneaks around and does things but wasn't backstabbing or attacking anyone. So all of our skills have techniques that you can effectively spend experience points on to learn how to do, that'll have some special rules for them. But for combat, there'll be, and if you go to the website, you'll see that we have some of them up for like one-handed weapons, two-handed weapons, and these techniques are meant to reflect special techniques, special little movements or combat style elements that you can do. That's more than just hitting a person. One sweep the leg, right? I mean, you have a bow staff. I can do more than just hit you with it. I can also do things like try and put you on the ground with it. Mm-hmm. I can do things like a double strike with it, like head leg or something like that. And so these techniques exist. And as we think of more techniques, we'll write more techniques down. One of the things I want to definitely make sure that people understand is, as time goes on, and that's the other reason why these resource documents are so important. They're kind of living documents, because the core is sacrosanct. We're hoping, I'm really confident that we can get the core down to the point where that doesn't need to change. Maybe a couple years down the road it'll change, but there'll be minor tweaks. But the resources, as like, we come out with modules, for instance, and there's maybe a new skill in there, or a few new fighting techniques that we hadn't thought of or figured out the rules for yet. They're just going to get implanted right into the resource document that you can download the PDF for free as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So these techniques, for instance, for fighting will grow. We're working on a whole grappling section because, we talked about pre-recording. I have friends who are MMA fighters, and it should be reflected that if I can get you on the ground in a certain position, I can do things like an arm bar or a wrist break or a throw or something like that, where people, if they want to get delvy into this, if they want to get nuanced, they can. If that's not the kind of game you're playing, you can ignore these and not even worry about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But and it's because it's a classless system, it also gets a little interesting, because one of the things that's always been fun game. But for instance, saying, oh, well, only a fighter class can learn how to sweep the leg, or a fighter and monk are the only two people who can sweep the leg. Well, I mean, if I've got a freaking wizard who's walking around with his bow staff because it's one of the 3 weapons he can take, who's to say over the years he couldn't figure out how to sweep a leg with it? And so also adding this thing where you also can't necessarily always predict what fighting styles or techniques a person knows just because of their quote-unquote class or identity.
Something else on that is,
mm-hmm.
and this is something that I've attempted to address, much to the chagrin of some folk, which just
mm-hmm.
makes me double down even further, is I don't think we've addressed how, I don't think a lot of TTRPGs, some have, and some video games have addressed
mm-hmm.
how things like one-on-one combat or even full-on warfare
mm-hmm.
evolve and change with the accessibility of magic. Like, what does the fact that magic is available in some settings change when it comes to hand-to-hand combat?
Absolutely. Like it's fascinating to see. I remember, first edition D&D, which I played for a long time. One of the DMs who would run it had his bachelor's degree in economics, and so it was hilarious because the worlds he would build is like, well, if healing potions are available and rather moderately inexpensive, then wow, so have we cured most diseases? And what would the battlefield look like when you could just have a guy come around and sprinkle this on or make a person drink this? Like, all of a sudden the fear of death and dying changes. What would that do to how people fight combat? All of a sudden, if I know that there's a guy back there who can like wiggle his fingers, ask his god for a favor, and all of a sudden I'm healed back up to full power, am I not going to just go balls to the wall in my combat, which would change how people approach the battlefield entirely? Now, and this is where it gets interesting, because this is something where we're going to have to comment on, but I can't tell people how to play that world. I mean, some people are going to want to just be like, oh, don't worry about it. And other people are going to be like, oh, that changes the whole socioeconomic aspect of society, because the more healing potions you can afford, the better fighter you are on the field. It gets fascinating. Miyamoto Musashi actually in the Book of Five Spheres made this great comment.
Thanks.
Which is, if you go into like one-on-one combat with the goal of not dying, you will lose. Whereas if you go into combat with the only goal of to defeat your opponent, you might live. But how does that change when I have a magic potion of healing? And I think these are those are great comments that I think, can only be explored through, and this is where the modules come into it. I mean, these can only be explored with people who think about these larger elements, can kind of take that into account and then kind of build their world around it, which is where like module building and world building comes in. Because you're gonna, like, your narrator, storyteller, DMGM is the one who has to kind of dictate that a little bit. But that's the other cool thing is with our kind of modular metaphysics, which in a high fantasy would be called magic system, you can do things like, oh, in our world, a lot of these things exist, but healing would disbalance how everything's done. So there's no healing school of magic, so that it fits into their concept of the worldview of what they're building.
Yeah, I've taken approaches that that when it comes to healing, it is available, but it's very difficult. But you need to. But it's something that only certain shops are going to sell to certain people. A shop may sell to an adventurer a healing potion, but they're not going to sell it to some Yahoo, because it's like how it is with, say, medicine. You and I know full well that taking other people's medication is a bad idea.
If you, yeah, exactly. Like, once again, not to get too mundane into it, but every once in a while in my job, I work in an ICU. We have someone come in and they're like, I took my husband or wife's blood pressure medication, and I'm like, well, now you're dangerously low and trying to die on me. Absolutely. Like, just like, why don't we just not do that? But the same thing, absolutely. Like, we'll sell a healing potion to these adventurers because we're assuming they know how to use them appropriately. But some guy walks in off the street. I mean, who's to say that in that society that's not exactly how it would get regulated, so to speak?
That's also the reason why in a lot of settings that I've written, I've gone with this idea of adventuring is a legit profession. As in, there is an adventurers guild, there is who act as the go-between when it comes to different types of requests. You have to be properly qualified. You have to go through certification. All of that stuff. It is
go ahead. Sorry.
It is very much a freelance job, but a job nonetheless.
Well, no, exactly. And one of the things that we've built in, with that in mind, we've built into our system this concept of one of the resources are contacts and associations. Because the idea is an association, whether you're the Shriners or you're the military or you're the Adventurers Guild, there's a hierarchy to it. There's a level to it, and there are rules attached to it. There are regulations attached to it, and we give people the opportunity to build in a fairly straightforward way various associations that might exist in their world with, okay, well, you're at this level. These are the resources that you have access to. These are the personnel that you may have access to. This is what you're allowed to do or not allowed to do. Because, in my opinion, that's the kind of stuff that makes a world I want to play a game in.
Yeah. And I've also, I suppose one of the analogies that I use when it comes to bringing newcomers in for this is think of the Continental Hotel in John Wick.
Yep.
The gold coins are a special kind of currency for people associated with that world of assassination. But even with that, there are certain rules you have to follow. And chief among them is absolutely no business on hotel grounds. Right.
Which is why the John Wick trilogy? No, there's four. Quartet. Once again, that's why that was a story worth telling, is because all of a sudden people started breaking that rule, and we want to watch what unfolds from that. But that can only be a meaningful story because we know that rule exists.
Not only that it exists, but by the end of the first movie, we know what happens if somebody tries to break it, because someone did. They were told their membership was revoked, and were revoked with the old Soviet method.
Fact. And that, and these are, now, not everyone's stories are going to be this involved or complex. Some people are going to go for a straight up hack and slash or a basic mystery. But these are the kinds of worlds that I feel that a lot of other systems don't take into account, and they kind of put all of the responsibility on the narrator, the storyteller, the DMGM. They lean on them to just make it all up, and that's fine. I mean, some GMs are
That's
absolutely
fine, but throw them a bone instead of just throwing them into the deep end of the pool and saying swim. Damn it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly it. We taking that into account, we're trying to put into our system enough of a backbone that you can build off of that, which is also why we also focus heavily. Pardon me. I'm not going to call it social combat, because not all social interactions are that level of what's what I'm looking for. You don't necessarily have an enemy in social, but we do refer to it as social conflict, because I want to focus on just as much as two enemies sparring off or centering off on the battlefield. Sometimes you're also going to see that with these associations. Suddenly, we're in the hotel and we're having a discussion, and I'm trying to leverage, hey, can you kind of give me 20 minutes to get out of here before you let people know that I just broke the rules? Or can I get some information? Can I get some more information or anything like that? I feel one of the things that we've really done a decent job at, and we're still trying to flesh it out, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback from it, but also some stuff that needs to get changed just a little bit, is the fact that we recognize that social conflict can be just as meaningful, depending on the story, as any kind of martial conflict. And because, once again, deep involved stories cannot help but involve a social element to it, in my opinion.
And I've made no bones about the fact that one of my favorite TTRPGs is Legend of the Five Rings. And
absolutely,
that is a game that, if you try and approach it with a more combat-heavy approach, you will. That's not to say that there isn't combat, but you will be shown your ass very quickly, because it is just as much about the political maneuvering between the different clans as it is combat.
Absolutely. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, yes, a simple approach to the combat end of things would be just put people in on the other side of the Caillou wall to the south. But even then, they have to deal with the fact that that the Crab Clan constantly needs supplies from other clans in order to keep that wall up.
Absolutely. And now, if in your game you don't want to worry about logistics, don't. But if you do want to worry about logistics, let's have a system that can help you account for that. And it's funny. I feel that a lot of the more popular games look at logistics as this bookkeeping thing that should only be done in between sessions. And while there's a lot of bookkeeping that I don't think that there's a lot of bookkeeping that can get in the way of the story in the middle of a gaming session, there's other aspects like working out logistics, planning this, executing it, that if that can be just as much fun from a role-playing aspect as just straight up, fighting a bunch of goblins in the forest. If depending on your audience or your players, can be even more fun. I've had groups of people who I was building a kind of a hack and slash campaign for, who suddenly they wanted to try and corner the market on, it was like arrows or something like that, where they're like, oh, well, if there's a war going on, we get all the arrows, then we can build and I'm like, you want to play an economically conflicted logistics game? Let's go, let's do it. Because once again, who am I to tell my players what kind of make-believe they want to play?
Pretty much. And when it comes to that, I find that there's a significant amount of people who, because they only played one or two games, they think that that's what role-playing as a whole is supposed to be. When one of my dear friends, Shiro, when I was explaining what the TTRPG space is to him. He had
Mm-hmm.
said that it's more akin to a universe. And that was just a spur of the moment thing, but he was, I think, onto something. That at this point, the idea that it's only one or two things may have been something that could have been applicable in 1978, but in 2025, the idea of doing that is so laughable it's not even funny, which makes it not laughable.
Right, we can't help but have, through technology, and we just have a more global perspective, and we understand that while we're doing things in our, little tiny personal universes, there's other stuff going on around us. And I think people are not only more aware of it, but I think a lot of people want a world where they know that things are going on outside of the world is changing while they're doing their thing. They know that the world is changing, so they might come back to town 6 weeks later or a month later, and they might very much want to entertain what it's going to look like with when a new governor comes into power, or there's been some huge upheaval of the trade route or something like that. Once again, if they don't want to play it, then ignore it. But I think a lot of people are actually more interested in that. And I'm not. I am not trying to poo-poo any system, but a lot of our more popular games are mired in, to your point, the late 1970s perspective of this is what RPGs are supposed to do, and this is how they run, and we don't. The larger world and its machinations shouldn't enter into it, and they're not built for that. And I'm seeing a lot of new systems come out that are taking it into account in a very, in my opinion, very entertaining way.
Oh yeah. And I know some might say that whole thing would be way too complicated. I'd say it's a matter of presentation.
Absolutely.
And again, it comes down to being willing to be open to the possibility of new ideas, not accepting every new idea because it's new. That's swinging the pendulum too far the other way. But
sure.
Merely the fact that what seems to be the way things are supposed to be may not be the case. And I realize who I am saying that, being the monk and all of that, and how so many sutras are all about challenging perception.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore we call it A, that's within the within the both the Heart Sutra and to a certain extent the Diamond Cutter Sutra.
Okay.
Which I'm not going to go into the full thing with it, because that is going into higher concepts of Buddhism, and that's a
different discussion.
That's a whole different discussion. But the point is that there's a lot of elements within sutras of saying that what seems to be A is not always A.
Correct. And the nuances of how that can affect people is, I think, a topic that not a lot of newer gamers are happy to explore. I've had, if you'll forgive me, quick backstory. My loving, supportive partner, she's not a games player at all, and it's been hilarious because throughout the course of kind of this process and venture that me and my team have been running, she's actually come to like, wow, this is actually something that a lot of her friends who she talks to are suddenly interested in, because they didn't necessarily, they thought that, okay, well, TTRPGs are just about killing bugbears in the forest or whatever. And then as Christina's kind of talked about some of, and our ideas are not novel, we're not the only people thinking this, but it's just talking about like kind of some of the stuff that I've talked about. Her friends are like, wait, so I could just play an adventure where I explore an ancient city and then figure out what my discoveries do? And I'm like, yeah, if that's the game you want to play, hell yeah. And all of a sudden, people who never even knew that they were interested in this kind of storytelling gameplay are like, oh, this could be a lot of fun. Like they're like, I kind of get to tell my own story, make my own movie. And I'm like, yeah, but you just have to sit down and talk to other people and play the game. And they're excited about it. People who never would have thought that this is something they were interested in.
Yeah. Also, I have to correct myself. It was in the Diamond Sutra that I was referring to.
Where A is not always A.
I had bossed it somewhat. There's a conversation that happens a lot in the sutra of Buddha saying to Subhuti, for example, is it possible to speak of A? And Subhuti says, no, there is no A to speak of. Therefore, we call it A.
Oh my gosh. Just absolutely lovely. Lovely.
And a lot of people look at that as a contradiction or a paradox when what it really is challenging perception. It's not just A, but also B, C, D, and every other letter of the alphabet that plays a factor.
Absolutely.
And I'd say for a lot of people, especially people who got their start in the early years, the idea of a very simulation-focused kind of affair is what was the default. Because keep in mind, TTRPGs evolved out of the wargaming scene in the 70s.
Absolutely.
And the problem is other people. The problem with that approach is that other people would have come in and have their own approach to the concept of role-playing, to the point where you have people who got into TTRPGs who have no background with wargames. Much like how, even though there's always going to be that relationship between wrestling and MMA, you've got people who got into MMA who have no interest in wrestling, and vice versa. There are some that are gonna have an interest in both, but those people will always be the minority, as was learned the hard way back in the 2000s with the Nokiaism.
Still some great freaking videos of just where you saw. Once again, I mean, we can go down this road of an MMA analogy. Like any number of people, they're like in MMA. Like how many people walked into the octagon, for instance, back in the day, who were exclusive strikers, and they got annihilated once someone was able to like take them to the ground. So then they're like, okay, well, they're still, and as they learned, they were like, okay, they still had to learn enough of their non-specialty or interest in order to get off the ground or to get out of a hold or whatever. But they walk. But look at these guys; they're still 80-85% strikers. And this, and just like, and then you've got, I mean, your Gracies who talk about a bunch of guys who just kept taking a freaking punch until they got their opening, who were probably 85-90% ground guys, and the recognition of that is that this game can be played in any ratio you want, and it's only when these two opponents come together that we'll see how the 70% striker versus the 90% wrestler, we'll see how it susses out, and that analogy broadens out to TTRPGs, which is your group of players are going to have various interests, and I always encourage people to challenge the boundaries of those interests. Just like back to like your statement on Buddhism, we're supposed to challenge these perceptions. We're supposed to like people are like, oh, I only want to play this. Well, are you sure? And now you might find out that that's the case, and then you can muddy around with it. But I feel like this deeper level of storytelling, and it is part of it is about exploring the boundaries of. You still there, boss?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. For some reason, my computer did something weird for a second. Okay, so what I was saying is let's explore these boundaries. Let's figure out what you're like, what actually you're interested in, what these things look like, and And that is something that, if you don't mind me getting on my soapbox for a second, where when you focus like a lot of these other systems that are very profit focused, well, they make their money off of entertaining a very specific style of play, and it's actually potentially dangerous for them to encourage people to explore other styles that maybe someone else does better. And so marketing is a thing, and so they try and tell people that this is how you're supposed to play the game. This is what the game is supposed to look like. And I challenge that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. And with that in mind, I know that Spectrum is in open beta, but what are the next steps that you guys have planned?
Well, so right now we are cleaning up the core, there's been a lot of feedback from various playtesters. We've done a lot of our own games, and right now we're taking a lot of that data and kind of, for instance, one example is the chart has been actually a little simplified. There were like 2 different colors, a gray and a black, for negative result rolls. We've taken out one of the grays, and we've cleaned up the math a little bit on the chart. We've definitely figured out some things that we thought should be in the core, like conditions, need to be in a resource so that it's more optional. And so we're cleaning that up. That will hopefully be a printable. That'll be a new PDF that'll come out. We'll probably do one more trial of that, and then we'll clean up the resources as well and make sure that that's presentable, understandable. I think we've done a pretty decent job of making things like understandable, but just making sure that we don't have anything in there, like, just at the end of the day, I'm trying to eliminate. Great example is, I actually really enjoy playing Pathfinder. It's a great hack and slash modified war game, right? But I'm not as good as a bunch of my friends because they're very good at memorizing all 600 pages and all the ins and outs. And I'm trying to make sure that our rules are straightforward enough that that's not a bottleneck for people if they want to play, where it's like, well, you got to memorize all the rules is written and all this stuff. So get through that. That's phase 1. The next big thing that I am desperately excited to do next is we are going to start writing modules for the system. I've got 30 in the sack, but we're going to start putting out modules. Now, I will be honest, whereas the rules for Spectrum and the system itself will always be free, modules, because they represent IP and in a lot of cases like some authorship, those will actually cost something if people want to buy them. This doesn't change based on it, because if a module includes a new rule, that new rule gets ported immediately into the resources. So there's never going to be this pay to play with a rule idea. There's one of the things that I remember just a couple years ago set me off was, if I wanted the stats for the Snow Fox, I had to buy, I can't remember which one of the D&D expansion books in order just to get that rule set, right? And that annoyed the crap out of me. I remember
putting out a rant that was like 5 pages long about how it was complete bullshit that even after all these years we do not have a monster creation system.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't ever want to be guilty of denying someone access to rules, or force someone to buy a module in order for them to have access to a rule. When we make these modules, what you're paying for is the creative IP of whoever authored them, because and the art, because art is a problem. Like, art is expensive, and we are absolutely using zero generative AI. So any art in my system is either art that I paid for from a source. I'm not going to lie to anyone. We're using some decent amount of Adobe stock right now. Except, let me tell you a side story. I went down and figured out the numbering nomenclature on Adobe stock so that we don't use anything after early 2022 because it might be AI generated at that point. And AI is a tool, and I'm not telling anyone that it's evil or bad or anything like that. What I'm saying is I don't want to ever use AI in a way that takes bread off the table of a true artist. I respect the hell out of people who create that stuff. And so that's been so if, when we make a module, I'm gonna have to pay an artist, I'm gonna be paying an author. We're actually working, like if you author a module for our system, you get a percentage, you would get a percentage of profit from that based on sales. Like if you author one of our module IPs, you just own a certain percentage of that profit. I'm trying to focus on like a solid 25% at least, because people who write this stuff are talented and good, and the people who create the art for it are talented and good. And the idea of what some of these larger house systems, Wizards of the Coast, do by not recognizing the value of these artists, in my opinion, is part of the problem. Is part of the developing problem with the industry. So anyway, back to your question. So modules will be one of the next big things we do, and like I said, we have cryptid horror in the works. I'm working on this whole liminal mystery concept based on this exploration of like houses and these mysterious places. I recently went down to this abandoned turnpike, and I'm like, oh my gosh, imagine if you just walked into a tunnel and then walked out and you were in a different place that didn't follow the laws of the physics as you thought they existed. Stuff like that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. And with that said, I'll certainly be looking forward to seeing how the project develops. But
it's a work in progress, and we've got bottlenecks, but we're giving it a shot.
But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery.
It has been an absolute pleasure, Mildra. Thank you for welcoming me.
Yep. And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Thank you very much, Mildra. And like I said, feel free to drop a line anytime.
And of course, a sincere thanks to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Hannevig away.